everyone, and welcome back to Poddin My Noggin. Today, we are joined by a special guest, Carolyn Murphy. Carolyn, welcome to Pod My Noggin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate the opportunity.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. Um, you have quite a story, and I was just watching on your website, which is just for anybody that's listening at home, and I will list all the links on the descriptions. It is firmfoundationsco.com.
Mhm.
And, before I interview anyone, I want to go and do a little digging and see what I can find. And, well, I found this very beautiful message that you recorded, and it moved me to tears. But it also moved me to joy. And I want to talk about this. So, anybody who watches this podcast, go over to firmfoundationsco.com and check it out, and you'll understand why. But we're going to talk about it today, your story. And let's begin with your story.
Well, my story is about resilience, transformation, and purpose.
Okay.
And it's childhood trauma. My book, God, Why Did You Save Me, is written from a child's perspective, enduring trauma. And the trauma, of course, you know that trauma can come out in so many ways: depression and anxiety, fear, and those things are prisons.
They are.
My faith is my bedrock, and I can't even try to exclude that, because I know everybody, may not believe what I believe, but for me, my faith and learning about mental health, those are the two things that helped me begin to climb out of this hole that I was in.
Mm.
Um, my God given phrase last year, this time last year, is I broke up with fear. And as I continue to cultivate my relationship with the Lord, he began to show me that my comfort zone is a cute little word, but it is a prison, and
Yes,
fear is a shackle.
it is. Yes. And I had mentioned to you before we started
Mhm.
recording that it gives me goosebumps because, myself as an individual has lived in fear for so long. And you are exactly right. It is a shackle, it is a prison, but it's
Mhm.
also a lie
Mhm.
that we have fabricated to
Mhm.
protect ourselves.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we don't serve anybody or ourselves, and definitely not God, by
Mhm.
staying in that prison. We need to break free, right? Mary said it best: take the shackles off my feet so I can
Mhm.
dance. So 2024 for me, like I said to you, has been a year of no fear, doing things that
Mhm.
I have always dreamed about, but
Mhm.
would never put myself in that situation. And I'm so grateful from the blessings that have come
Mhm.
from doing that, right? Because now
Mhm.
I'm here having this conversation with you, whose story is so transformative in the sense of who you were and where you were when you were a little girl to when you were a young adult, and to how you've taken your story and come here today to be the woman that you are today, which is quite a fantastic example of how we can be in the trenches with others and help them heal.
Mhm.
Do you want to talk about your childhood trauma? I'm not a voyeur, so it's one of those things. I don't want people to ever think that if there's an area that's sort of off topic that they don't feel comfortable with, they have to. But is it something that you want to share today for the people who are listening?
Sure. Um, One thing that I want to say is that I just learned that your purpose is greater than your pain.
Mm.
And with that, my childhood trauma, I endured so much fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of rejection. And in my childhood, I experienced so much death that it was just, I guess I just couldn't process it, or I processed it in the way that I thought I could process it. Because looking back, I didn't grieve it. By the time I was 8, I had 3 siblings to pass. Um, I'm the oldest of 6 children, and the first sibling passed from brain cancer, when I was 1, and then the last 2 died in a house fire while I was keeping them at when I was 8 years old. So from 8 years old until I think in my late 20s, I carried the burden of asking God, why did you save me? It should have been me that died in the house fire than my siblings, because
You-
the rest of my life was just awful, to say, for lack of a better word. And actually, during that time, um, I that was my prayer to God. Lord, just let me die in my sleep. And when I would wake up the next morning, I would be mad because I woke up.
And this was after the fire.
This was before the fire, when my prayer was to God to let me sleep, let me die in my sleep. Um, but it's just the childhood trauma was just, it was just, I think they what they call it, cumulation, just continuous, just continuous.
To think that, from 1 to 8, the different things that happened to you as a child and the different things that life put on you to deal with were, in my mind, insurmountable, right? Um, and then to think, because, I've struggled with my mental health, but to think as a child, you were praying and seeking deliverance from this world so that God would take you in his sleep. Like that's heavy.
Hmm.
Like, what a cross to bear as a child,
Hmm.
really. There's more to your story, which people can read your whole story in your book, God, Why Did You Save Me? Have tissues. Have tissues. Because it was almost like there was a force that was trying to oppress you as a child
Hmm.
in through all means necessary.
Hmm.
And everything sent to break you
Hmm.
didn't break you because you're still here today, right?
Hmm.
So, I mean, I have an assumption. I don't want to make an assumption, but did you blame yourself for your siblings passing after the fire?
I actually did. I was I blame myself because I wasn't able to run back into the house to get them.
Okay.
I really did, and that's part of why I started asking God, "Why did you save me? I should have been the one to die in the house fire."
That's a lot for an
Mhm,
8-year-old to
mhm,
carry. And I also understand that culturally at that time, therapy really wasn't an option or talked about.
mhm,
Mental
mhm,
health wasn't talked about.
mhm,
And I mean, I say at that time, but I also know the massive stigma that still exists
mhm,
culturally
mhm,
for you and BIPOC people everywhere. It's it's
mhm,
it's a it's an issue that we need to solve, right? Because therapy can heal and mend broken hearts.
mhm,
So this happened to you at 8,
mhm.
and you are.
I'm 51 now.
Oh, I wasn't asking your age. You never ask a woman her age, but okay, but
I'm okay with that.
that's fine. I would never have guessed 51. So kudos to you. But at the same time, it's so that we're looking at what 43 years ago this happened. So you're 8 years old. This has happened. Other things have happened.
Mhm.
When we're What happens next to this 8-year-old? Now I know that you went on to become the valedictorian of your class. You were an overachiever, perfectionist. Do you feel that that's how you channeled all that pain?
Mhm. School was my safe haven.
Okay.
School was my safe haven. So I definitely went to school every day just to get away from the house. I
Okay.
remember being, I think, in the sixth grade, because the Lord has been allowing me to reflect back on my life. And I distinctively remember being in the sixth grade, staring out of the window, and in my little mind saying that I want to learn to speak well and to write well and to be an accountant.
Okay.
And because I believe that those things would take me far in life. And I thought about the being an accountant thing, and I'm like, why would a sixth grader say she wants to be an accountant? And but I equated accountant to money, which there was
Mhm.
lack of then.
Yeah.
And but I'm far from it. Far from it. I am by trade. I've been working in the medical field as an optometrist technician and an ophthalmologist technician, ophthalmic, and but I still it's amazing what we would do in our minds to try to escape trauma that we're having to endure.
Living or creating sort of almost like realities that don't exist that we
Hmm.
can escape
Hmm.
to in our heads, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
You finished school, high school.
Well, let's see. For I would say to describe my teenage years to young adult years, I would say I lived a life of Russian roulette.
Explain that one.
And that is a lot of times we're a product of what we see our environment. So I saw my mom in and out of relationships with men. Of course, then I didn't see what I saw when I turned 40 or my early 40s, that I sensed that she was battling with her own trauma. So living a life of Russian roulette meant I was in and out of relationship with men, having unprotected sex. I did not dive into drugs or alcohol. That was one of the things that I just denounced because a lot of my family that I did when I was around them, uh, that's what they did. And I never wanted to lose control of myself to that extent. So I never did indulge in drugs or alcohol. But as I said in my book, my choice of drugs was men, was sex. Addiction is addiction.
It is, yes. And
Mm-hmm.
pleasure is an outlet,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed someone recently who we sort of talked about. We talk a lot about a lot of trauma on this show and a lot of mental health, and that's the umbrella for this space, is to talk about healing and struggle and how we overcome that or work through it. And for this particular person, their addiction became food, right? And that's where they found pleasure, in the unresolved needs that they had as a child, in coping with the pain and the anger. That's where they went. So it looks different for every person. It's
Mm-hmm.
never exactly the same, um, how we cope and how we try to survive our environment. So you had mentioned just now that at 40, you started to notice that your mom had patterns of trauma that she was trying to cope with as well. I would think that your healing journey began many years prior to that realization. Would I be correct or incorrect?
I want to say that was the beginning of it. I, one of the things that I did, I sought therapy, but it wasn't consistent. It was hit or miss, and more so miss. I've always known that something was wrong with me. That's the way I used to describe it. I knew I was different. Um, Later on, I knew I was depressed. Um, and so I tried. See, now I was a single mother. Let me say this. And so when you're a single mother, you are living in a state of survival.
Mm,
So you dealing with your mental health is not at the forefront. You're dealing with the fact of trying to keep a roof over your head, transportation, taking care of the children. And so that's why I said therapy, counseling was very sporadic. And I really got that when I was in college because of the counselors and things we had in college. But as I got older, let's see, I think in 2017, I came across this class called Mental Health First Aid. And I think it was a Saturday class and it was an 8 hour class. And I was like, I want to go to that because of the way that it was described is learning the signs and symptoms of, someone that's in crisis, basically. And I said, I want to see what this is. And I tell you, that was that aha moment. I was like, that's what's wrong with me. That's what I did that and I do that. And so by the end of the 8 hours, it said if you want to go deeper into this, you can take a 40-hour class to become a peer, a certified peer.
yeah,
And that's what I did. The following year, I enrolled in the 40-hour class, successfully passed that. And I volunteered at the Memphis Crisis Center here for 3 years uh, from 2019 to 2021, August 2021. And of course, that's a warm line, but we dealt with just various things: suicide hotline, elderly abuse. And I remember vividly asking the Lord, like, why did you bring me here? Because I was hearing things that just blew my mind. And I heard the Holy Spirit tell me, I want to teach you how to minister without ministering. And I'm like, okay, because in places like that, you can't really share your faith,
yeah,
or push it off on anyone. But there were plenty of opportunities where people ask, "How did you get over it? How did you get through it?" And I was not going to deny it. But I say that my faith is my bedrock.
Of course.
And so that's where the journey truly began in like 2017, 2018.
That's incredible too, because knowing what I know, talking to you, and which people will find out when they read your book, it's hard to imagine things that would shock Carolyn. I'm sorry, but like, I'm sorry. Like, when you say that to me, I'm like, okay, like, how bad does it have to be to shock
I know.
someone who survived what you've survived? So, and I love that part about God telling you that He's teaching you how to minister without ministering.
Hmm.
Isn't that beautiful, though?
That
Like,
is beautiful.
like that
That is.
gives me goosebumps because, excuse me. Of course, my mic was on, but anyway, no one's perfect. It's beautiful because, and we're gonna get into it because why did He save you,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So you did the mental health first aid, which I'm quite familiar with, and then the peer
Hmm.
certification,
Hmm.
and this is the catalyst that starts to change things. It starts to sort of connect dots in your head,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then culturally not really being able to explore the mental health side of it or being in a space maybe, and then also, as you noted, being a single mom and
Hmm.
just the sheer amount of work being a single mom takes. And you're right, it's about keeping the roof over their heads and food on the table and transportation and schedules and all of these things.
Hmm.
Well, I'm super happy though that you eventually were able to put you on the front burner and do the work. So the catalyst was the certification and the
Hmm.
doing the work in the outreach centers. And I'm going
Hmm.
to cough again, so I have to go mute myself.
Hmm.
Which I was not successful in doing because I'm not super technological. So I'm just going to edit this little piece right out. But so you did that work and then you noticed something in your mom because how did that play out?
Again, my faith. At this point, I begin to seriously um, I began to take my relationship with the Lord serious. It was hit or miss because still the old Carolyn was still there, still trying to um, what I call stuff my emotions,
Mm-hmm.
not wanting to feel. And that's something I've always done, just wanted to be numb. And even when 2012 came, so from 2012 to 2015, we were homeless. So even before then, I was still stuffing my emotions, didn't want to feel. Because to me, emotional hurt is the worst hurt out there. I'd rather for you to bop me over the head than to cause me to feel emotions. Um, and so as I began to take seriously my relationship with the Lord and look inward, asking God to heal me and deliver me from all the hurt. Because one thing that I've learned, unresolved trauma, you're bleeding. You're bleeding out. And so everybody you come in contact is potentially, you know, uh, uh, is in the way of you exploding if you haven't dealt with it. So a lot of times I just bled all over people, and that's something that uh, I want us to know. Your unresolved trauma it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts everybody around you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, as I began to truly cultivate my relationship with the Lord, the Holy Spirit turned me in the direction of my mom. And he told me, he said, look at her actions, listen to her words. And when I began to do that, he said, doesn't that remind you of somebody? And I was like, oh my word, I said, that's mean. And so she never did speak about, what happened to her. But when the Lord pinned me in her direction, I was like, so she must have experienced trauma, because there were times later on, because the Lord gave me a vision that she was going to pass 5 years before she passed. And 1 year prior to her passing, I've got the nerve to ask her, Mom, why did you hate me? Because it felt that way. All of her trauma that she dealt with it comes out in a negative way. And I just knew she hated me. I just knew she hated me. And when I asked her that, she just looked at me and tears began to roll out of her eyes. She said, I did not hate you. She said, I just didn't want you to go down the road that I went. So for her trauma, she did drown herself in alcohol and drugs to try to deal with the pain. And that's why I say now that unresolved trauma, we learn to deal with it. There's unhealthy coping mechanism and there's healthy. I'm here today to teach us healthy coping strategies. I'm here today that God has sent me to the African American community, and specifically the church, and even specifically the ministerial staff, to let us know that it is okay not to be okay. It's okay to seek therapy. Therapy is not meant to replace God, the healing of God. The Lord let me know that He's the source, but everything here, if He allows it, is a resource. So it's okay to seek out therapy.
This really hits home for me, and I'll tell you why. So, I was raised in the church. I'm a Pentecostal preacher's kid.
Me too.
Um, I did not turn out how they hoped I would. But, this is my journey, not theirs. But it's in a lot of religions, and especially in the Pentecostal religion, there's sort of this misdirected faith. And I want to clarify this, right? The misdirected faith is when a Christian will say, I don't have to do anything, it's all in God's hands.
Mm-hmm.
Which, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not negating that, because God has
Mm-hmm.
the ability to intervene and do as He will with your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But God gave us something that a lot of people forget that they have, and that's common sense. And so
And
I went on
free
a
will.
rant once
Mm-hmm.
to a relative who's in the church, and I said, you know, God's not some magical fix it shop. He's not just going to go, hey, you're asking him to fix you, but what actions are you taking to fix
Mm-hmm.
you in his
Mm-hmm.
name?
Mm-hmm.
So you're just laying there expecting him to pour over you and heal you, which he
Mm-hmm.
could. I'm not negating. But don't you think if you took steps and moved in the direction that you believed that God would want you to move, that
Mm-hmm.
you would see results?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why that statement that you just said really resonates with me, because I think
Mm-hmm.
just religion in general, there's such a stigma against seeking
Mm-hmm.
mental health
Mm-hmm.
support. But I'm like, I say to the same people, if you had cancer, you would go to the doctor to get chemo,
Mm-hmm.
but you'd also
Exactly.
pray about it. You would leave it
Yes.
to God's hands, but you would go get that treatment for the
Mm-hmm.
cancer. Why
Mm-hmm.
are
Mm-hmm.
you not doing the same for your mind? And I do have to bring this up real quick because I'm very cognizant of it. I'm Mir, and you have a bit of a southern accent, and I'm talking to you, and I don't even. It took me many years to realize that it happens, but I start speaking with a bit of a southern accent. It's a very, but it happens even if I'm speaking to someone from England or France. It's this weird thing that I notice that I do, just as an FYI. But I think that that's really powerful. So you're out here essentially breaking generational curses. It's what I'm hearing. And to me, also doing the work of God, because people do need to realize that trauma and mental health need to be healed. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, turn to God, seek refuge, but
Mm-hmm.
also take action,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
combined, look at what the potential for healing is paired
Yes.
together.
Yes. It's awesome you said that because when you were speaking, the Lord reminded me of something because I'm always watching things about mental health and trauma and things. And someone said something profound to me. Your trauma is not your fault,
Mm,
but your recovery is your responsibility.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And we can choose to be what happened to us, or we
Mm-hmm.
can choose to use what
Mm-hmm.
happened to us
Mm-hmm.
for something different,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
oftentimes, I think in trauma, people aren't consciously aware that they're choosing to be what happened to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's their
Mm-hmm.
identity.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's not to just for anybody listening. Don't come for me because trauma is so complex, and I
Mm-hmm.
am not belittling anybody's trauma, anybody's experience,
Mm-hmm.
anybody's individual truths. Just that, we have the ability to take control of our lives. And if
Mm-hmm.
you read God, Why Did You Save Me by Carolyn J. Murphy, you'll understand how she did that, right? And, God may not be a part of your belief system,
Mm-hmm.
but you can still achieve healing, just for anybody listening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you did all this work. I mean, I have a question and I can ask you after we're done, but unless you're open for me asking.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm an open book.
Okay. Did you ever share with your mother what happened to you at 6 years old?
Well, actually, the you talking about the molestation?
Yes.
No,
So she didn't.
because when a grown man tells a 6 year old, if you tell her, I will kill her. I held that was my first beginning of keeping many secrets. So I never told her, but she happened to be in the car with me as I was making I just remember as I was making an appointment with a therapist, and I was telling the therapist about what happened. And I could just see her out of my peripheral, and it was like, what? And it didn't go well. I do remember that it didn't go well. I think she was angry because I kept it from her.
Mm,
Um, but it dealing with my mom and anybody who has suffered trauma, you people around you have to walk on eggshells, and that's what I did most of my life.
yeah.
Just walk on eggshells around her. But so she found out, but I didn't tell her. She overheard the conversation. Um, I just my thing was at that point was the Lord was showing me that that I was getting ready to move into a time where people did not want to talk about God.
Mm.
And so you're gonna, and then the Holy Spirit told me you're gonna have to learn to walk it out instead of talking. And I'm like, okay, God. And she was my experiment, learning to trust God and walk it out, walk my faith out in front of her.
Carolyn, I I think you're an incredible human being. And it's totally off topic, but at the same time, I swear I'd never talk about religion on this podcast and or politics because it's so polarized, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk about it today. I steer clear from usually religious people, and I'll tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
They like to weaponize God and Christ,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they do it
Mm-hmm.
loudly, proudly, and where everybody can see. I know I'm blessed to know because of my upbringing. I would say about 15 what I believe to be true Christians. Christians who may not agree with the lifestyle that you're living, but they show you love, tolerance, and they don't judge you. They don't try to segregate you or cast you out. They're open armed. They're there for you. So
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying right now is exactly what God needs in our current time is the Christians who realize that talking it out is going up against a lot of loud people making true Christians look awful. And I think we both know that true Christians are not awful people. Um, so the walking it out and to show the world God's love through your actions and through how you treat others and through the work that you do, that is probably going to ring truer than anything ever before,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And people will find it bizarre because I am a gay man, but I love me some Jesus. Always have,
You talking,
always
you
will.
talking my language. You talking my language.
Always have and always will. And I struggled, we're so off topic, but I struggled for such a long time because religion taught me that I was an abomination and a depravity of God. Okay? That's what religion taught me. It took me a long time and even took me denouncing Christ, okay? To come to a place where it was my beautiful and true Christian of a sister who said to me one day when I was sharing this with her that I had denounced. Oh, and she had said, well, if you've denounced Christ because you're gay, because that's what like you told you can't be gay and a Christian. Now that you've denounced Christ and you feel better, can't you just love Christ and be gay? Right? And she said, like, we don't know really if it's a sin. God's not standing right here next to us saying, no, it definitely is a sin. You're going to go to hell. You have to find your truth in God. Maybe that's not other people's truth in God, but it could be yours. And then only you will know when the day comes if you lived your life correctly or not. Right? And so I did not plan on talking about that on my podcast. But I find peace in prayer. I pray
Mm-hmm.
often. I'm only here
Mm-hmm.
because God saved me from so many things that should have prevented me from being here and even being able to host this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much aware of what he has done in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So there you have it, world. The gay Christian. And, my parents don't necessarily agree with me because they have their doctrination that they have. And I don't live for anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I live for me, and I live that God be glorified through my actions in ministering without ministering.
Mm-hmm.
Is because there's a lot of similarities here. Now, I want to be
Mm-hmm.
very clear. I've had trauma. My trauma does not come close to what you have experienced in your lifetime. So the fact that you can sit there with that $1 million smile right now, it's proof that you can heal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the takeaway for everybody is that you have to heal. So I want to definitely buy Carolyn's book, God, Why Did You Save Me? Even if you're an atheist, even if you're not someone who goes to church or anything like that, the book is worth reading because it chronicles her life and her struggles and it's just a really beautiful book. Also, go to firmfoundationsco.com and watch the video that I had watched prior to this interview today that brought me to tears. What are you doing now? Talk about Firm Foundations Co. for a moment.
Well, the purpose of the business, I deem it as a bridge between people of color and the mental health professionals.
Okay.
um, because I hear a lot there, even though mental health awareness, it's gaining ground,
It
for
is.
lack of better words. But I still come across hearing people say that I want a therapist, but I want someone that looks like me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's my plight. So I have a video podcast. It's rough, but I had to just get it out there.
Of course.
I have a video podcast. It's called the Black Mental Health Forum. And right now I have like 4 episodes loaded up on YouTube because it's under my business name, Firm Foundations Co. And so I just literally connect with various mental health professionals. I bring them on. They talk about their specialties, whether they do PowerPoint presentations, whether they ask me questions, and we have a good discussion. But I want us to know that we're out there, and so even though the demand now outweighs the supply, but I want us to know we're out there, and I want to leave us without an excuse, in all honesty.
I love that.
So I have people from different states. Hey, I'm looking for a therapist, but I can't find one. And that's going to be one of the things that I try to put together on my site, a resource page where people can just go on and click their state and find a therapist, a counselor, case manager. I want to connect with as many people of color that's in mental health.
Love.
So I deem myself as a bridge builder, so to speak.
Well, that's perfect because those bridges do need to be made. And I think I have
Mhm.
had the privilege in my life to know so many wonderful and incredible Black men and women, honestly, to have worked with so many wonderful people, to have led so many Black women from the US. And some of the most healing and um, informational conversations that I've ever had came from being connected to these people. And I know that it's not even so much someone who looks like them, But the reason they want someone who looks like them is because people like myself or others do not understand the cultural
Mhm.
implications of
Mhm.
making that step into therapy and healing, or even
Mhm.
opening up a conversation about trauma. And it's you can teach some of these workshops in school and you learn about them, but a Black person's going to understand the plight of a Black person better than a white person or any other race is going to understand. And I love that you're doing that, because there are plenty Black practitioners in the mental health world. So many, right? So by you creating this bridge, doing your podcast and your Facebook group for I have it up somewhere. It's called the um,
The
Forum,
Black Mental Health Forum.
Black Mental Health Forum, which
Mhm.
also in itself, like being a part of a group like that, where people can connect all over the country, even maybe the world, and say, be around other Black folk who are there for the same reason, right?
Mhm.
Like that
Mhm.
just creates community. And I
Yes.
love to hear that and I love to
Yes.
see it. And it's time, right?
It
You know,
really is.
white people have been getting therapy for years. You know what I mean? What I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
Black people need to break that generational trauma and step into their truth and shine. Live
Mhm.
your absolute authentic selves. Heal
Yes.
and just just be wonderful, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
Carolyn, this has been a really enlightening and wonderful conversation. I think the work that you're doing is extraordinarily important. I think your message is extraordinarily important. What is next for you? Because I got a feeling that you are only just beginning.
I really am.
That's like I feel it through the
I
screen.
really am. I I know that, we're all born with a purpose, and God has revealed some of my purpose, and I'm actually walking in some of it.
Hmm.
I don't know how big this thing is going to be, and it's not about the fame
Hmm.
with me. I endeavor to give God all the glory.
Hmm.
I want him to smile on me.
Absolutely.
Um, but I dig my heels into this because I don't want people to have to suffer like I did. If I can have a hand in a Black woman that's sitting in the pews, her knowing that there's help out there, even if she can't go to her pastor,
Yeah.
she can call me or my organization.
Hmm.
But I think the biggest thing I endeavor to do is literally to connect with Black pastors and the ministerial staff, and to ultimately get them to connect with at least one mental health professional, one for the ministerial staff and one for the parishioners. Because otherwise, if we don't hit this thing head on, it's already pastors out there that are experiencing mental health problems and issues, but they still stand in the pulpit bleeding all over the people.
Absolutely. And
They have to be an example.
that's really interesting because you are going after Black religious folk leaders, right? So like you're getting like a reinforced brick wall there that you
Mhm.
have to somehow chisel through and get the messaging
Mhm.
across that trusting in God and receiving therapy
Mhm.
together can
Mhm.
facilitate ultimate growth and healing, right?
Yes. Yes.
That is an ambitious but needed, so desperately needed endeavor.
Yeah,
And
it
I
really is.
pray honestly that God sends you all the grace, the soldiers, the resources, the courage, the opportunities to get out there and talk about it. And the more we talk and the more we live by
Mhm.
example,
Yes.
people are
Yes.
going to take notice.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so if you are a Black person, I want you, if you've ever felt, and anybody to be honest, but we're going to focus
Mhm.
right now on the Black community. If you are a Black person and you have experienced mental health in any way, and you're ready to sort of take some control back in your life, I want you to find, and I'm going to link this in the descriptions of these shows, find the Facebook group, the Black Mental Health Forum. Go check out firmfoundationsco.com and get in touch with Carolyn. And you can also go to YouTube and look for Firm Foundations Co. as well to see 4 of her podcasts, which I'm sure that there will be more. And just live your truth. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Carolyn, for being here today and for doing this work. I applaud you.
It's an honor. It's really an honor.
It's
It's really an honor.
it was
It really is.
it was a beautiful conversation, and I just hope that who if it people can hear it, that it can help them. Right? That's why I'm
Yes.
here, is to try and get people's stories out there so that people can learn and heal from them,
Mm-hmm.
right? By proxy
Mm-hmm.
and collective healing and all of that sort
Mm-hmm.
of thing. So,
Mm-hmm. There is healing on the other side of this mountain.
absolutely. Without question. And I think we're both, and there's so many people that I know that are testaments to the fact that you
Mm-hmm.
can heal from trauma and you
Mm-hmm.
can find your purpose. And I was so tempted. I was like, tell us now, why did God save you? But maybe I think people should go read the book, right? Because let's
Mm-hmm.
support Carolyn in her ministering without ministering, right? And buy her book. Find out why God saved Carolyn J. Murphy, because
Yeah.
there's a reason, and to me, it makes perfect sense,
Thank
right?
you, Lord.
Thank
Yes.
you so much to everyone at home. Tune in again next week for the next episode of Poddin My Noggin. Until next time, get out there and live your wildest dreams.